What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about the final Best Picture nominee that I had to watch. I'd watched all 9 other Best Picture nominees before this, and I was really looking forward to checking this movie out. After seeing the trailer, it looked really interesting. I really love Jeffrey Wright as an actor. I think he's incredibly talented. Sterling K. Brown was in this movie, who's given some incredible performances throughout his career, and I thought the subject matter of this movie sounded really interesting, and I was really looking forward to watching it. And the movie I'm going to be discussing with you today is American Fiction. American Fiction is directed by Cord Jefferson. Thelonious Monk Ellison's writing career has stalled because his work isn't deemed black enough. Monk, a writer and English professor, writes a satirical novel under a pseudonym aiming to expose the publishing world's hypocrisies. The book's immediate success forces him to get deeper enmeshed in assumed identity and challenges his closely held worldviews. So I was very excited to watch this movie because, like I said, great actors in this. I thought the subject matter of the film was incredibly interesting. And unfortunately, this movie is a huge mess, and I'm not even 100% sure as to how this got nominated for an Academy Award, aside from the subject matter, because the subject matter is fascinating and it's really unique and interesting, and I liked that element of it, but the execution of the subject matter is really flawed, and I'll talk about it in great detail when I break the movie down. So at the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to Thelonious Monk Ellison, played by Jeffrey Wright, who he is this author, and he is a college professor, and the very first scene is him getting into it with one of his students because he's talking about a book that uses the N-word, and he has a white student in there who says that she's incredibly uncomfortable reading that book, and he finishes the conversation by saying, like, if I can get over it, you can. And it's a really funny sequence to start the film, and he gets called into his superior's office, and they say, hey, we know things haven't been going well for a while. You probably could use to take a break. You're about to go to this seminar in Boston. Just take some time off from work and go out there and spend some time with your family. And he says, it's not going to be a vacation spending time with my family. So he goes to Boston, and he ends up meeting up with his sister. You see his mother, and then later on we're introduced to his brother. And when he goes out with his sister, they spend some time together, and she starts talking about their mother's health and how her health is declining, and she's really worried about it. And very shortly after that, his sister passes away, and he is now in charge of making sure that his mother is taken care of. His brother starts to play a bigger part in their lives, played by Sterling K. Brown, who his wife has left him because he was cheating on her with a man, and he is gay, and he'd been living in this relationship for a while, and he has a couple of kids, so his life is struggling. He's trying to find his footing, and Monk is trying to figure out a way to financially be able to support his mother. She apparently has 2 houses. She's had to refinance her house or remortgage her house to get some money back, and he needs to find a way to help financially support her. Well, he can't come up with a really good idea for a normal book, and he's seeing these books come out of the black community that he feels are very exploitative, where they're talking about the community in ways that he finds repetitive. It's always stories about people in gangs or people dealing with drug addiction or familial abuse, and he doesn't want to fall into those categories, but he decides, in order to try to make some money, he writes this satirical version of a novel where it's all about gang violence and it's about drug use and all the things that he doesn't want to incorporate in his own novel, and it becomes an instant success. And he writes it under a pseudonym, so no one knows that it's him because he doesn't want it to interfere with his other work. But the entire film is this book keeps blowing up and blowing up, and Monk has to try to find out, does he really want to continue on with something that he doesn't really believe in order to take care of his mother? So as I said, I was really looking forward to watching this movie, and as I said at the beginning, it is a total mess. And as you can hear from the way I'm describing the plot line of the movie, it's really all over the place. The film tries to do way too much, and I think that's its biggest downfall. For starters, I want to talk about some of the positives. I think all of the actors in this do a really fantastic job. I'm a huge fan of Jeffrey Wright. He's been in a ton of films over the years, and every time he shows up in something, I'm always blown away by his performance. He is absolutely hilarious in such a natural way that it doesn't even feel like he really has to try. His comedic delivery is just brilliant. And I think that he does a really great job in this movie movie. He fits the role very well. And Sterling K. Brown is fantastic as always. I think he fits his role perfectly. And everyone else, there's a huge cast of characters in this movie that all do a really excellent job with the material that they're given. As I said, I think the subject matter for this film is incredibly fascinating because it is interesting to think about Black cinema as a whole. And, February was Black History Month, and when you talk about Black cinema and Black filmmaking, so many films put out by the Black community are often rooted in trauma and rooted in the Black experience in a way that's always showing overcoming these extreme hardships, or movies about slavery, or things that bring up a lot of trauma that has to be difficult for the Black community to just relive over and over and over again. And so to have a movie that's trying to pick apart the mass media of like, okay, there's this type of Blaxploitation material being put out there for white audiences to consume, and Black viewers might look at that and say, well, this is just manipulating an audience, and this is just trying to get viewership where it might feel hollow to a person in the community. And I think that that's a really fascinating idea, and I think that the way that it's brought to you as an audience member is really interesting. But the issue that I have with this movie is it falls into its own trope. It's essentially criticizing these movies that are emotionally manipulating the audience in a way that doesn't feel natural, and in a way that feels like it's exploiting the community. In this film, it's not necessarily exploiting the community, but it is emotionally manipulating the audience by portraying itself as a comedy, but trying to incorporate all these dramatic elements that feel so forced. Sterling K. Brown's character obviously is a gay man, and there's this whole thing about the divorce with his wife, but he's focused on so little, and the scenes where he's put in there just feel like they're there to make the audience feel something when there's been a large amount of runtime focused on something else that's not necessarily as interesting. The film jumps from place to place and from tone to tone, where it's like, here's a comedic moment, here's an overly dramatic moment. And that's not to say that you can't have both in a movie, but it feels like it's such a hard shift from moment to moment between comedic elements to dramatic elements that it's really hard for it to stick the landing. And for you as a viewer, you have to excuse a lot of poor storytelling in order for any of the actual film to pay off. There's a relationship that starts with Monk and this woman that he knows in a community, and it felt like it was just put in there to add some sort of dynamic to create some sort of emotional tension for you as the viewer. You really could have spent most of the focus of the movie on Monk and his mother and Sterling K. Brown's relationship with his mother, but even those moments are so few and far between, and I just felt like anytime there was a heavy, dramatic, emotional moment, that it was just put there for the audience to attempt to feel something amidst the comedy that didn't necessarily always land. And there is some truly hilarious moments in this, but the satire is so on the nose that it doesn't necessarily feel clever in any way, shape, or form. And I'm disappointed by that because, as I stated previously, the subject is super interesting. This idea of white culture essentially being fascinated and obsessed with these films that are exploitative of the Black community, where it's just showing one side of the Black community, is a fascinating idea. And I think maybe in the hands of a different director or a different writer, it would have come across in a way that I found way more interesting or compelling. But instead, this movie just fell incredibly flat for me. As far as the visuals are concerned, it was shot okay. Most of it was relatively flat. The cinematography wasn't anything super unique. The editing was fine. The musical choices in the movie were okay, but I just found myself not captivated for this almost 2-hour runtime outside of maybe 3 or 4 moments. And most of the comedic elements were in the trailer, and that was really unfortunate because I felt so much potential here, and it just fell flat in virtually every way for me. So have you seen American Fiction? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was a huge letdown. I was really excited to watch it, and unfortunately, it just didn't hit for me at all. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.